there's a whole group of people that aren't being heard. They're not being advocated for. And so when you realize that there's a gap, advocate for change.
Hi, Hive community. Thank you so much for joining us for another podcast of Talking Inclusivity with the Hive. Today, our guest is Gerene Keesler. I am super excited to bring Gerene on. She is a part of our community, and she is making a change and a difference in the disability community when it comes to college entrance and applications. So welcome, Gerene.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Gerene, I have a habit of having a billion questions and not being able to get all of the things done and answered on here. So we're literally just going to jump in. But first, I just want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself before we jump into the questions. So can you just tell us a little bit about Admissions Untangled and just a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So a little bit about me is I am a third-generation Tampa native and grew up here in Tampa, going to school in the diocese. And then I went to college at Loyola University. And ironically, I worked in the admissions office for work study and didn't expect it to be a 30-year career, but that's what happened. And while at Loyola, found out that I had epilepsy. I had seizures off and on as a kid, and I know we'll get into more of that later, and found out about a career of being an independent educational consultant, which led to me opening Admissions Untangled.
Wow, and we've talked a little bit too about prior to jumping on this call about your disability and just how that influenced you wanting to start Admissions Untangled. So can you just share a little bit about your disability?
Sure. So initially my parents were told that there's what I heard was that there was like a 98% chance I had epilepsy, but there's an outside chance it was the fever seizures. And that's what they heard. And they just did not want me in a special school. They did not want me labeled. And what my father would say is, well, Gerene, we just couldn't handle it. And I said, but handle it was your job, and because I'm finding this out, decades later. And I was medicated throughout grammar school and then stopped in high school and had the seizures off and on. And then in college, I had 8, now they call them tonic-clonic, but back then it was grand mal. I had 8 tonic-clonic seizures back to back in college in the admissions office, ironically. And in between each one, I said, my mother's phone number in father in Florida is this. My father's phone number in Florida is this. I need to go to the hospital. I need to go now. And so I think they're more dumbfounded that I was actually making sense of, people to call and what needed to be done. And the neurologist, when I got to the hospital, said, has anyone ever told you that you had fetal alcohol syndrome? And I said, no, that's never come up. And they labeled it fetal autism spectrum disorder. So I was born in 1970. Fast forward, this is 1992. And I'm hearing all of these things. So at that point, I wanted to know everything. And I said, no, I need to know today. And so the EEG start happening, and I'm asking 8,000 questions about, what all this is, and started getting some testing and was knocking on the door of academic enrichment, trying to understand why my peers were getting A's and I'm getting C's and I'm doing triple the work, and why am I not getting their grades? And realizing that I could have had accommodations and I could have had, different supports, but I just didn't have them. So it was just a lot to absorb.
So I know we're kind of already leading into that, so I'll ask our first official question. So can you share more about your personal journey with your autism diagnosis and how it impacted your perspective on education.
When I started hearing about the autism diagnosis, I started thinking back. I did the toe walking, I did the W sitting, and I had all the markers that I heard were autism markers that maybe, like I tell the students, well, maybe in the dark ages, it wasn't as known as it is now. And because I had parents that just wanted to, like I tell them, shove me in the deep end of the pool and just figure it out, I knew that I was a little bit different, but I didn't know how to accommodate, for lack of a better word, to make things better, or to do things like the other kids. And I noticed it a lot when I was in high school. The high school I was at didn't have any kind of railings or banisters in their gym, and I realized I'm the only one that doesn't know how to get down because my balance was so off. And so I started thinking about all those things. I was like, that's a lot. That was a lot to between the toe walking, the W sitting, not having any kind of balance or coordination, all of those are autism indicators. Feeling the need of, if I was in a place where there was structure, order, A happened because B happened or C happened, I didn't want to leave. And I clung to those kinds of people like glue.
So when did you get an official diagnosis? Like what?
I was 34.
Wow.
I was 34, and through the Epilepsy Services Foundation, because my first couple of jobs after leaving, let me backtrack. My first career was in residential life. And looking back on it, that had some telltale signs of probably me being on the autism spectrum, because even though I had a lot of responsibilities, I was responsible for anywhere between 400 to 1,000 lives. It's a lot of crisis management. The flip side is I didn't have to cook. I didn't have, to pay electricity, because working in the residence halls, all that's covered for you. I didn't have to fix anything. I still don't have any of those kinds of fix-it skills. And those are things that if you're in your first apartment at 18 or 19, you take for granted that, I know how to, I know what rent costs. I know what electricity costs. And I just didn't do any of that. And so when I was getting into my first non-college job, I just didn't know what to do, because I was in a completely different environment that was foreign to me. And I went to my first apartment and I didn't know what rent costs. I didn't know what Tampa Electric costs. I didn't know how to manage any of that. And none of those skills are taught to you. And I was in a call center, which was, there's nothing wrong with that job, but for a person on the spectrum, all that noise and all those sounds and all those people, I got to get out of here. This is just not good for me. So a lot of it was trial and error and figuring out, where can I best utilize the things that I know how to do that are going to be a good environment for my skills and talents that aren't going to stress me out. So I went back into the admissions world. I'm going to backtrack. So I had my neuroscience and I forced my parents to go. I said, no, denial's over. We're all going to sit here together. And it talked about the varying challenges I had, and then started going back into jobs with admissions.
And so really, like, your diagnosis kind of led you back into admission, working in the college admissions area. So when did that expand to people with disabilities?
So I started realizing that, this was something I could do long-term as a career. But as I got older, I realized that, two things. One, I realized that this college consulting was an option. And I started noticing even pre-COVID that a lot of people were working remotely. And I'd always, my parents wanted to be mainstream, so I'd always driven, but I'm self-aware enough to know that I really wasn't great at it. given my different challenges, and I've talked about like balance, coordination, fine, gross motor skills, and all of those have to be really good to be a good driver. And, so I just had this conversation with my mom and I said, we're done, because working from home works for me. And I was making mistakes on the road. Like if it got later at night, I didn't have an accident per se, but I would start to veer in the other person's lane because I was just getting tired, whether it was the meds or, just the different challenges I have. And I needed something that would allow me to use the skills I have with admissions and student affairs, but I could no longer manage that 8-hour sustained work day where I had to be on 8 hours a day. It was just too hard for me. And then if I was in the admissions office and I had to go across the way to, say, the bursar's office and then come back, and then again, you had to be on, and there was no time to just decompress. And then if you're in an office that you can't, it's frowned upon if you take an hour for yourself, and you don't want to have that chit chatter with the other, something you dislike them, but you need that 30 minutes, 45 minutes to just, I need a minute. Very often, some people don't like that because they want you to have a constant engagement. And for someone on the spectrum, that's exhausting. So as I started looking into the independent counseling world, I started picking up different contracts here or there, whether it was for mock interviewing or essay editing, and just building up enough of a skill set to where I could work on my own. And I've been with a company that's out, the company I work for is actually out in Bedford, Massachusetts, but the person has a contract with the main company's out in Abu Dhabi. So I have a cohort of students that are in Dubai, and all of those students endeavor to go to Harvard, Brown, Duke, Yale, Penn. So I work with them, and then I'm building up my practice to work with the students who are like me, who have many different skills and want to go to college, but may have autism spectrum, may have epilepsy, they may have be very high functioning 2E, and need that extra support. But what I'm telling parents very often is that support is not equal on all campuses. Like I tell the students, well, back in the dark ages when I went to school, I just had to be a pest. To be honest, I just had to tell academic enrichment, and God bless them, they were great with me. I don't get it, help me. I don't understand why I'm not learning. And we would see my peers' test and my test and figure out, what are they saying that I'm not saying? Where are pieces that I'm not putting that they're putting? And just piece it all together. And before I knew what executive functioning skills were, I would try taping the class and see if that helped. Or I would try doing, additional notes and try different kinds of notes and see if that helped. And it was just a lot of trial and error before I figured things out.
So now you're using, your journey of just being undiagnosed and, trying to kind of trial and error your way through, the college process to help those with disabilities to be more strategic in their applications and in the process of preparing for college.
Yes. And, I have my master's degree in counseling, and almost all of us that do this independent college counseling also have a certificate in college counseling through one of the UC's, University of California schools. And then additionally, because I work with this population, yes, I've gone through my peaks and valleys and scars with having my different challenges, but I wanted to be conversant in, somebody who has dysgraphia that I don't have, or dyslexia or whatever. So I just got a certificate in cognitive coaching. So if somebody came that was, had some difficulties that I don't have, that I had a broader understanding of how to help them. And I mentioned this earlier, there are some schools that are phenomenal with assisting students with their different challenges and providing accommodations. And there are some schools that aren't set up for that, they do the best they can, but they just don't have the time and or resources to do that. So it's really a matter of figuring out, is this school the right school for me? Does this school have the resources that I need to be successful? And then I show them, I said, then I want to look on the back end. I want to look, do they have the graduation rate and the career services? So when you're done, can they help you place in what you want to do?
That's good. So I'm going to actually come back and remind me towards the end, because I want to have a conversation about what are those good schools, because I'm sure people would be interested in kind of getting some insight onto the schools that are a little bit more inclusive and have the resources that are needed. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the unique challenges that are faced by students with disabilities during that college application process, like beyond the academic requirements. Like, what other challenges do you see that you work with?
So some students feel like I get two extremes. I have some students that feel like I need to share everything about my disability, and we call it verbally vomiting. Every little, cut, scrape, anything on your IEP, on your college application. And I generally don't recommend that, because that's not really a part of your academic story. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's really not a part of how you're getting admitted. And that's not going to factor into you getting admitted. However, once you are admitted, if you need, depending on the level of support that you need, then you want to share, I might need extra time. I might need a reader. I've always used a different room because, noise distractions, whatever that is. So I have students look at the disability support services ahead of time saying, well, is this already being provided? Because if they've never done that before, you're coming in saying, I need. I want to talk to that disability services ahead of time and saying, can they do? Rather than you asking for things that they just might not be able to provide. So I want to see how that's handled. The other thing is, if a student needs that support, I have a student that says, well, Gerene, I don't want anybody knowing. No one's going to know unless you tell them. And as an admissions professional and as the professionals who are on the disability services side, I can't tell anybody. They can't tell anybody. So unless you're sharing that with your friends for some reason, then no one will know. But what I tell students is, I would rather you have the support and not need it, and be like, you know what, I've got this under control, everything's good. Then we go 6 weeks into the semester and you've got D's and F's. And then the professor's going to say, well, if you needed accommodations and we could provide them, why didn't you ask for them? Because now you've got this D and F, it's too late. And in my case, that's what I would tell my parents, because if you read my story, you know that I failed out my first semester with a 1.1. And in my mind, I was like, well, I'm going back. I'm going to finish what I started. And I graduated with my master's degree with a 3.4 because I was determined to figure this out. So had I had those accommodations in place in the beginning, and had I had all this knowledge in the beginning, whether it was a math tutor or extra time or whatever it was I needed, I might not have been put in that predicament to fail out so spectacularly and not know these things.
So at the college level, you mentioned, checking to make sure that they even have the resources and the supports that are needed prior to trying to get admitted into that school. So is there no legal recourse to help students, like, let's say that they want to go to their local college, and maybe that college doesn't have some of the resources that are needed? Is that an automatic, okay, I just can't go to that college, or is there things that student can do?
It depends on the school. It depends on the school, but the IEP does not carry over.
Right.
A 504 could, again, it depends on the school, but what I tell students is that if you have the availability and the resources, like I was very fortunate that my neuropsych was funded by Vogue Rehab. And I was able to get the neuropsych done. The neuropsych has the most teeth. And if you're able to get the neuropsych done and have everything in black and white, here are the deficits, here are the accommodations, and have that document, that's what I would use.
And so, but going back to the accommodations, again, I'm just interested in finding, so the college doesn't really have any specific responsibility in ensuring that appropriate accommodations are available, or?
It just depends. It depends on the school and how much accommodation is being requested.
Okay. So tell us, I guess we're going to go back to that prior question. So tell us what schools are really good at accommodations.
So I just visited High Point University. High Point University does come with a heftier price tag. I can't deny that. It is beautiful. It's in North Carolina, High Point, North Carolina. However, what I really liked about High Point was they're great with financial aid. And if you're a person who needs more significant support, you come in with an academic advisor, a learning coach. You have a career advisor. So there's significant scaffolding from A to Z. And it's just a way for you to be held accountable for all pieces of the pie, whether it's your learning coach, your academic advisor, your career coach. But they're obviously doing something right because their graduation rate is like 97%. And their career outcomes are like 97, 98%. So they've found a way to, really do this well. Another place I liked a lot, because I just visited North Carolina schools, was Guilford College. Now, whereas High Point University has all kinds of bells and whistles and is just beautiful, Guilford is a little more on the rural side, doesn't have the kind of things I don't want to touch that because it's so beautiful. It still is a great place for students that feel like, if you're a student that feels like, I'm not going to get into college, I don't have the grades. Guilford accepts, I think it was 97% of the applicants, but they provide tremendous support for students.
So for students with disabilities, they have a lot of resources and tools.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And there's a website called Think College, and Think College divides it by state of what schools are excellent for students with disabilities and what kind of support they provide.
What about local colleges? Which ones would you say are the ones that are more known to be to help with accessibility and inclusive measures?
University of Tampa, fantastic. And then closer to Orlando, Beacon College is specifically for students with learning challenges. And again, their career placement rate is high in the 90s. It's a great place to go visit if you're considering college and you're on the spectrum and you've got some, different cognitive challenges. They're great. One I haven't seen, it's not local, is like Landmark College is also for students with any kind of cognitive challenge. It's in Vermont. It's been a little too cold for me to visit Vermont.
Same. How can parents and caregivers best support their children with disabilities throughout the college search and the application process?
So right now, colleges are offering virtual information sessions. Many of them are offering virtual information sessions, virtual tours. The school counselors do a phenomenal job supporting their students. A lot of us who are independent counselors came along because the average counselor student ratio is about 1 to 400. In California, it's about 1 to 1,000. So if you're looking to work with someone like me so your student can get extra support, we offer one-on-one guidance and one-on-one tailored guidance.
So what are some common misconceptions about college admissions for students with disabilities?
That it's impossible, that you can't do it, that you're never going to go to school. The lead epileptologist at Tampa General told my father that there was no medical reason for me walking or talking. I should be a vegetable. And he did not believe I had 1 degree, let alone 2, until I showed him the paperwork. So you just don't know what you can do. The other thing is that I like to read. I love to read. I love to learn. And I know that building things and doing things with your hands, mechanical things, not my gift. But if that is definitely a gift for many others, and the trades are not spoken of highly enough. And there are many, many openings for students in trades. They're going to make a lot of money. So that if that's something that a student is open to, that we can definitely look at, where are their gifts, where are their skills, the airline industry, lots of openings there, a lot of potential to make good money. Welding is another one. I have a friend whose daughter just got a position as a welder, and she makes more than I do. So
do you assist with individuals who are interested in trades as well, or is it more just college type applications?
Usually college type, but if they're interested in the trades, I'm certainly not going to push someone into something that they have no interest in. So what I will do is every area, like for example, here being in Hillsborough County is area, we're region 15. So if I go online and I say region 15 targeted occupation list, it's going to come up and show me all of the occupations in demand for this county, and most of them are trades.
Yeah, I'll be sure to include that too, because you're right, like that. I mean, I know this is a conversation about college, but the trades it's a huge industry, and absolutely, if you can, oftentimes the certifications and trainings are much shorter, and you can walk out making, very good money. And so that may be another conversation that we have to bring on, just talking about options between college.
I've gotten 2 calls this week about that, and somebody wanted to be a CNC machinist, didn't know what it was, but I looked it up and showed them, how to get to where they needed to go to get that training. But if that's somebody, has that interest, then yeah, go that way. Nursing is another one. If you want to go into administration, then yeah, you will probably need, definitely need, more, well, that given your profession, more schooling. But if not, you don't need to go to college.
So what are some very key resources and tools available to students with disabilities and their families to utilize during the college process, that application process?
So the main one I focus on is that Think College. I stay on there. That an LDA, Learning Disabilities of America, LDA.org. Those are the 2 that I use most frequently. That would really help a student that is looking to go to college and that has some challenges. And then there's another website, it's called Coursava, and I will send that to you. It's coursava.org. And basically what Coursava is, it is an online deck of cards, and you put in anything you could possibly want in a college, like your college dream list. And there's an area for accommodations, disabilities, and anything that you could possibly think of that you would need. And then when you're done, Coursava will spit out at you your dream college list.
And you mentioned the LDA. I think that's what you said. What is that one?
Learning Disabilities Association.
Okay. And they also help with the college application process.
No, I would do that, but it'll get you started of a place to start.
Okay. So we kind of talked about this, or I was kind of trying to lean to this when we were talking about, if there is a local college near someone and maybe they don't have the accommodations that are needed. We know as a society, we need to move more towards inclusion, and that this eventually should not be a conversation we have to have. We shouldn't, that every college should have clear measures that they are utilizing and ensuring that they're accessible to all different learning needs. And so how can we create a more inclusive college admission process for all students, like regardless of their disability? Like, what do you think collectively we can do to create that space in the college?
Conversation and education. Like there's our main admissions, one of our main admissions groups is called we're an acronym happy group. It's called NACAC, National Associations of College Admissions Counselors. And our regional group, SACAC, the Southern Association of College Admissions Counselors, we realized there wasn't a subgroup for neurodivergence, and so we're starting to create one. So when you realize that there's something that doesn't exist, start having that conversation. Hey, why isn't this there? There's a whole group of people that aren't being heard. They're not being advocated for. And so when you realize that there's a gap, advocate for change. It might take a minute.
As all change does. Now, and that's more, you're talking about the counselors, you're talking about the people that are helping with the academic admissions, but what about the actual college campuses?
Well, to trickle down to there, because in this SACAT group, it's a combination of school counselors and people like me who are independent counselors and college counselors on the college campus. So it's a combination of, what do we have, where are our gaps, what do we need, and, how can we move forward?
So what advice would you give a student with a disability who is feeling overwhelmed by the college application process?
So my initial consultation is free, and if working with someone at a paid service is not doable, then give me a call and we'll figure out how we can get you to a service that either at your school or through a community group that we can get you the help that you need.
And how can listeners connect with you and learn more about what you do?
My email is my first name. It's Gerene, Gerene, Gerene at admissionsuntangled.com. And my website is www.admissionsuntangled.com. And I also have a Facebook group. My Facebook group is College Admissions for 2E, LD, ND, and U. So if you are a parent or a student that is about to go to starting the admissions process and you have questions that we can assist you with, please, by all means, join that group. And I'm talking to myself right now. And we are happy to assist you with anything related to the college admissions process.
Amazing. And Gerene, will share your website and information also in the show notes, so people will have that as well. Thank you so much for joining and sharing. This is an important conversation. I even love your story about, hearing that your parents were told that this is the limit that you would be able to attain, and now we're having a conversation and you've got 2 degrees. And so, and we hear this over and over and over again with, with individuals with disabilities, that, you're told one thing by the medical profession, and again, no negative to the medical profession, but no one fully understands or knows the brain and knows the capabilities of an individual. And so the least that we can do is to presume their competence and give them all of the resources and all of the tools that are needed to be their very best. And so college is definitely a part of that conversation. I'm grateful that you came on to share. And again, we will provide your information for other people who are interested in utilizing it.
That sounds great. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on Talking Inclusivity with the Hive. We hope the stories shared inspire and empower you. Remember, every voice matters and every action can make a difference. If you haven't gotten the chance to listen to the About Us episode, a link will be provided in the show notes. Learn more about the Hive's journey for inclusive housing in Tampa. If what you hear resonates within you, join the movement. Hit subscribe and join our tribe. Let's continue to build a world where inclusion is the norm.